My house, my rules. It is a principle I have adhered to all my life. Every morning for the last 15 years, it has been the same. I, Alfred Higginbotham, 75 years old, wake up at 6 a.m. sharp without an alarm clock, put on my burgundy robe, which has long since gone out of fashion, and go down to the kitchen to make coffee. Strong, black, no sugar, just the way I like it. My habits hadn't changed in decades, and it gave me a sense of control over my own life. As a young man, I was successful as a corporate lawyer in Albany. 35 years of impeccable service with the law firm of Baker, Higginbotham and Associates. My name is still emblazoned on the sign even though I have long since retired. My ability to manipulate the law and people made me rich, respected, and, I'll be honest, lonely. My late wife Eleanor often said I was too fond of power. She was the only person who could tell me the truth to my face, and I miss that more than I'm willing to admit. The country house near Albany is my pride. 3 acres of land, a carp pond, a 19th century gazebo, and the building itself, a 14-room Victorian mansion that I restored from the original blueprints. Every detail has been personally thought out by me, from the arrangement of the antique prints on the walls to the sprinkler system on the lawn. It's a place where I feel like a true master. My relationship with my only son Randall is a sore subject. When he was little, I had high hopes for him. I took him to baseball games, hired the best tutors, planned for him to go to law school. But Randall was always too soft, too sensitive, like his mother. Eleanor defended him, told him the boy had his own way. I didn't listen. At 16, he announced that he wanted to be a musician. I laughed at the idea, called it bliss, and forbade even to think about such a career. On his 18th birthday, I gave him his law school acceptance papers, the best gift I could give him. Randall tore them up right in front of me. "I won't live your life," he said then, "and I won't be you." We didn't speak for almost a year. Eleanor was caught between two fires trying to reconcile us. When she got cancer, we made a temporary truce. After her death, which happened 12 years ago, our relationship with our son turned into a Cold War. We would see each other at Christmas and Thanksgiving, exchange empty phrases, and then part with relief until the next forced contact. Randall became a music producer. Not as successful as he would have liked, but well known in certain circles. I never acknowledged his accomplishments out loud, though I secretly followed his career. Whenever he got into financial difficulties, I helped him anonymously through my accountant. Randall, of course, knew the source of the help, but never thanked me. That Thursday began as usual. I drank my morning coffee, watched the news on my tablet, and did the simple exercises my doctor had prescribed. Later, Berkeley, my old buddy from law school, called. We were supposed to discuss an upcoming fishing trip. Instead, he shocked me with the news. "Have you sent out the invitations to your son's wedding yet?" he asked nonchalantly. I choked on my coffee. "What are you talking about?" "Randall's wedding," Berkeley repeated as if he were talking about the weather. "I got the invitation yesterday. It's very nice, though a little fancy. These young people like to make things complicated. Anyway, I'm honored you've included me in the guest list. There'll be 200 people from what I understand." My heart skipped a beat. "Berkeley, this is the first I'm hearing about this. Randall never told me he was getting married." There was an awkward pause. "Oh," Berkeley said at last. "This is unexpected. I thought the invitation gave the address of your country house. June 21st, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Big reception in the garden. Buffet. Live music. All very pompous." I felt the blood rush to my face. My son was planning a wedding at my house and hadn't even bothered to inform me. Moreover, he had already sent out the invitations without even asking my permission. It was beyond anything he'd ever pulled before. "Berkeley," I said dryly, "I'll call you back later." As I hung up the phone, I froze in place, trying to comprehend what had happened. My thoughts were jumbled, and my emotions came in waves. Anger, resentment, confusion. How could he do this? My home was my territory, my fortress. Randall knew that better than anyone. He knew it, and he broke every boundary. I dialed my son's number. It rang. Long, distant beeps. He wasn't picking up. I sent a text. "We need to talk. Urgent." There was no reply. An hour later, an envelope was delivered. Heavy cream-colored paper, gold embossing. It was the kind of invitation Berkeley had received. I opened it slowly, feeling my fingers tremble, not from old age, but from rage. Randall Higginbotham and Olivia Cavendish invite you to share in the joy of marriage. The bride, Olivia Cavendish. I didn't even know my son was in a serious relationship, let alone planning a marriage. Who is she? Where's she from? I'd never heard that name before. I sank into my chair, feeling old and unwanted. The invitation continued to describe the upcoming celebration. Elegant garden, buffet by a renowned chef, live music, dancing under the stars, marquees in case of rain. They planned a grand event without skimping on the details. And all of this in my house, where every blade of grass is trimmed at my behest. This act was typical Randall, to take what didn't belong to him, to use my resources without asking, to confront me. As a child, he would take my books without asking permission and return them with the pages bent. As a teenager, borrowing my car and returning it with an empty tank. And once at 15, inviting friends over for a party while Eleanor and I were at the theater. We returned to the trash, which he didn't even bother to clean up. I remembered when he asked me in college to pay for his trip to a music festival. I refused. It went against my ideas of a wholesome pastime. Then he simply took my credit card without asking. I only discovered it was missing when the bill came. Or the time he used my name to get a loan for his first recording studio. I found out about it from a co-worker who happened to see the paperwork. Randall was 26 at the time. "You embarrassed me," I told him at the time. "And you've embarrassed me my whole life," he parried. I paid off his loan to avoid the scandal, but the moralizing could not be avoided. That was our last major conflict until today. Now this wedding. 200 guests, my house, without my knowledge. The phone rang, interrupting the flood of memories. Randall's number. "Hi, Dad." His voice sounded tense, but with a contrived lightness. "Did you call?" "Yes, I did," I answered, trying to stay calm. "I wanted to congratulate you on your upcoming wedding. I wish I'd heard about it from Berkeley instead of you." A pause. "I've been meaning to tell you," Randall said uncertainly. "I was just waiting for the right moment. After you send out 200 invitations to the party at my house?" 220 to be exact, he said, a flicker of irritation in his voice. "Look, I know this doesn't look good." "Not very good?" I interrupted. "This is the height of insolence, Randall. You're planning to use my property for your wedding, and you didn't even bother to ask permission. I was sure you wouldn't say no." He sounded hurt now. "After all, I am your only son, and this is the most important day of my life. It's not about that, and you know it. It's about respect. It's about common courtesy. It's about you continuing to act like a spoiled teenager who takes whatever he wants." "Of course I do." His voice has risen. "Again with the lectures. I'm doing it all wrong again. You know, I didn't even want to invite you. Olivia insisted that the family should be together at times like this, that I should make peace with my father, and I knew it was useless." "Who's Olivia?" I asked coldly. "Mom, you didn't even bother to introduce me to your fiancé." Randall took a deep breath, clearly trying to calm down. "We've been dating for 3 years, Auntie," he said finally. "She's a curator at an art gallery. She has a degree in art history. She's great, and she deserves a better wedding than I can give her on my own dime. That's it." It wasn't just about the comfort of my home. It was about money. I grinned bitterly. Now I see. You wanted to impress the bride and her family with my house, to show yourself more successful than you really are." "That's not true," Randall objected, but unconvincingly. "It's just that you have the perfect place to get married. A big garden, a lake, an old mansion. And it's all mine," I cut him off. "Not yours." "Fine," his voice sounded cold now. "I'll cancel the whole thing. I'll explain to the 220 guests, including Olivia's parents, that my father was too principled to let his son marry in his empty house. He was hitting a nerve. I hated social judgment. All my life I'd spent building an impeccable reputation, and he knew it. "I wasn't saying you couldn't use the house," I said after a pause. "I'm talking about the manner in which you did it, about you not respecting me enough to ask permission." "So you do?" There was a flicker of hope in his voice. I should have said yes. Any normal father would have said yes. But I wasn't a normal father, and this insolent manner, This disregard for my feelings, it was too much. I'll think about it, I said dryly. I'll let you know what I decide. Dad, the wedding's in 3 weeks. It's all paid for. The invitations are out. You should have thought about it sooner. I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of righteous anger and vague shame. Maybe I really had been too harsh. Perhaps I should have just agreed. After all, what should I do? The house really is empty most of the time. But then I remembered Randall's tone, his certainty that I wouldn't dare refuse, his willingness to use public opinion against me. No, I couldn't just give in. It would be an admission of defeat in our years-long Cold War, an admission that he could do whatever he wanted to me. I walked over to the window, looking out at the manicured front garden. Thoughts of what to do swarmed in my head. I could refuse outright. I could agree reluctantly. I could impose conditions, like more respectful treatment in the future. But none of these options felt right. None gave me a sense of control over the situation. None taught Randall a necessary lesson. I needed something more, creative, something that would show him once and for all the consequences of disregarding my boundaries and my property. What would Eleanor say? She'd always been the voice of reason that kept my anger in check. Alfred, she would say, he is your son, the only thing you have left. Don't destroy it out of pride. But Eleanor is gone, and I'm too old to change, too used to being the one in control, the one who always gets the last word. Looking at the mansion in the thickening dusk, I made a decision. Randall would get his lesson, and it would be a lesson he would never forget. The night after I talked to Randall was a sleepless night. I tossed and turned, trying to find a comfortable position for my old body, but my thoughts kept me awake. Memories, resentments, regrets, all mixed together in a thick stream that carried me through the darkness of the bedroom. Toward morning, I got up feeling wrecked. A cup of coffee didn't help. I stared at the kitchen clock, watching the minute hand move slowly, and thought about what to do about the situation I was in. Option 1, forbid Randall from using the house. Plain and simple, my house, my rules. He was disrespectful, let him reap the consequences. 220 guests would be disappointed. The bride's parents would be outraged. Randall would be humiliated. I imagined him calling all the invitees, apologizing, explaining the situation. My father wouldn't allow it. Yes, the very house whose address was listed on the invitation. No, I didn't ask in advance. That'll teach him respect. But there was something about that option that didn't sit well with me. It was too predictable. This was exactly the reaction Randall had expected from me. He'd have the moral high ground, a poor son who'd had the most important day of his life ruined by an angry father. Public opinion would be on his side. Option 2, agree. Swallow my resentment, let the wedding take place in my house. To be a good father in a way that I was never considered to be. That would be a mature, wise decision. I snorted, sipping my cooled coffee. Who am I kidding? I've never been a good father in the conventional sense. I've never been good at forgiveness, at letting go of grudges, at putting other people's interests ahead of my own. Not even for Randall, especially for Randall. The image of Eleanor came into view, her quiet voice, her soft gaze, her easy smile. She always knew how to calm me down when I was on edge, always found a way to reconcile my son and me. Alfred, she would say, you're too hard on the boy. He's just finding his own way. He needs to learn responsibility, I replied. Life is not a game. Life is more than rules and obligations, she objected. It's also about love and forgiveness and the ability to see beauty in unexpected places. I never understood this philosophy of hers. Eleanor was an artist at heart, though she never painted a picture. She saw the world differently, as a palette of possibilities rather than a system of rules. She allowed Randall to explore, to make mistakes, to find himself, protected him from my strictness. I remember the day he turned 12. Randall broke a vase, an antique, 18th century family heirloom. I was furious, ready to ground him for a month. Eleanor stepped between us. It's just a thing, Alfred, she said quietly, and Randall is your son. What's more important to you? I backed away then, but I didn't agree. To me, it was a matter of principle. Actions have consequences. Randall should have learned that lesson. And now, 35 years later, I'm sitting in the same kitchen with the same sense of rage. And Randall is still as irresponsible as he was at 12. And Eleanor isn't there to assuage my anger. Feeling the need to move, I decided to take a walk. The morning was cool but clear. I wandered the quiet streets of Albany, trying to clear my head. My thoughts kept returning to the upcoming wedding, to Randall, to my country house. There had to be a third option, something that would allow me to maintain control, teach a lesson, but not look like a villain in the eyes of society. Something unexpected. I took a seat on a bench in a small public garden, watching an elderly couple feeding pigeons. They seemed so peaceful, so harmonious. Had they managed to solve all their problems? Or had they just learned to live with them? My gaze happened to fall on a billboard across the street. Bright colors, evocative images of half-naked people covered in neon paint. Epitage, the sign read, organization of non-standard events, making your holiday unforgettable. Something clicked in my head. An idea, vague at first, then increasingly clear, began to form. I pulled out my phone, found the company's website. Epitage specialized in organizing alternative parties, festivals, performances. Body art, avant-garde music, fire shows, strange installations, anything that would shock the conservative public. Olivia's parents, according to Randall, were just such an audience, as were most of his guests, probably. I called the number on the website. A cheerful female voice answered, "Epitage Company, what can we surprise you with?" "Good afternoon," I began, suddenly feeling awkward. "I would like to know about the possibility of organizing an event on private property." "Of course, what kind of event are you interested in?" I hesitated. How to explain what was on my mind? "You see, I'm looking for something shocking, something that might embarrass conservative people." The woman on the other end of the line laughed. "Oh, we specialize in just that. We have a whole catalog of ideas. Maybe a body art festival, or an avant-garde performance, or maybe a Birdsley party, decadence, eroticism, provocation." I felt myself blushing. At 75, the first two options sounded appropriate. Can we combine them? Of course, we could organize a body art festival with avant-garde performance elements. Nude or semi-nude models covered in neon colors, unusual installations, experimental music. Believe me, it will be unforgettable. That's exactly what I wanted. Something unforgettable. Something that Randall and his guests will remember forever. I wonder, would it be possible to organize such an event for the 21st of June? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Wait a minute, I'll check our schedule." There was a clatter of keys. "Yes, that date is free. We have several teams. One of them will definitely be able to work that day. But we'll need information on the venue, number of guests, budget." "A country house outside of Albany. 3 acres of land, large garden, lake, budget unlimited." The woman whistled. "Sounds impressive. And what's the occasion? A birthday? An anniversary?" I hesitated. What to say? "I want to ruin my son's wedding?" That sounded awful, even in my head. "It's a surprise for my son and his fiancée." "How sweet," the woman exclaimed. "An unusual gift, but memorable. Young people appreciate originality nowadays, if she only knew." "Yes, that's right," I murmured. "A memorable gift. Great. Then we should meet to discuss the details. When would be a good time?" "The sooner the better." We arranged to meet at their office the next day. I hung up feeling a strange mixture of emotions: gloating, shame, anticipation. This was wrong. I knew it. Eleanor would be disappointed, but Eleanor's gone, and there is only me, an old man with wounded pride and a thirst to teach a lesson. Back home, I found another message from Randall. "Dad, we need to talk about the wedding. Please call me back." I ignored it. Now that the plan was beginning to take shape, I didn't want to give in to doubt. I didn't want to hear my son's voice, to see his name on the phone screen. That could have shaken my resolve. Instead, I spent the rest of the day perusing Epitage's website, looking at photos from their past events. Naked bodies covered in glowing paint. Strange, incomprehensible installations, people in exotic costumes. It all looked alien. Not for someone like me, conservative, old-fashioned, used to order and predictability. But that's exactly what I needed. Something completely opposite of the elegant wedding Randall and his Olivia dreamed of. Something that would make their guests blush and avert their eyes. Something that would make it impossible to pull off. During the night, I dreamt of Eleanor. She stood in our country garden among the blooming roses and looked at me sadly. "You are making a mistake, Alfred," she was saying. "This won't solve your problems." "He must learn respect," I answered. "Respect can't be forced. It can only be earned." I woke up in a cold sweat with my heart pounding. The clock read 3 in the morning. Eleanor's words echoed in my head. Respect cannot be forced. It could only be earned. Was she right? Had I earned Randall's respect? Or was I just demanding it without giving anything in return? I lay in the dark, thinking about all the times I denied my son support. When I didn't go to his school concerts because I thought music was a waste of time. When I mocked his dreams. When I put work before his birthdays. Was I a good father? Definitely not. But was that an excuse for what he did? For taking over my house without asking permission? No, definitely not. By morning, the doubts had receded. The plan was still on track. Randall would learn his lesson. The Epitage office turned out to be a bright, chaotic space in a trendy Albany neighborhood. Graffiti on the walls, unusual furniture, employees with colored hair and lots of piercings. I felt like an alien in my austere suit and cane. I was greeted by Laurel, the same woman I'd spoken to on the phone. Tall, slender, in her 40s, with purple hair and an intelligent face. She didn't look as extravagant as I expected. "Mr. Higginbotham, it's a pleasure to meet you." She shook my hand vigorously. "Let's go to the meeting room to discuss your project." The meeting room was more restrained. Light-colored walls, a large table, minimal distractions. "So," Laurel began, opening her laptop, "you want to organize a festival of body art and avant-garde performance art at your country house? It's for your son and his fiancée, right?" I nodded, suddenly feeling a prick of conscience. Laurel seemed like a decent woman. Should I have involved her in my plan? "Mr. Higginbotham," she continued, "I don't mean to be intrusive, but are you sure that your son and his fiancée would appreciate such an unusual gift? Our events are rather extreme for a conservative audience." I looked her in the eye. She was perceptive, sensing something was wrong. "Frankly, Laurel," I began slowly, "my son doesn't know about this surprise. You see, the situation is complicated, so I told her the truth, about how Randall had sent out the invitations without asking me, about our conflict, about my desire to teach him a lesson. To my surprise, Laurel didn't seem shocked or judgmental. She listened intently, nodding occasionally. "I understand," she said when I was done. "Right, family relationships can be complicated. You think I'm a terrible father." It wasn't a question, but a statement. Laurel shook her head. "I'm not judging you, Mr. Higginbotham. That's not my role. But if you're asking my opinion, there are more constructive ways to resolve a conflict." "I tried," I said bitterly, "all his life. Nothing works." "Perhaps," she said softly, "but I don't think this solution will give you the satisfaction you're looking for." I sighed. Eleanor again, only in a different guise. "Maybe you're right, but I've already made my decision." Laurel nodded. "In that case, let's go over the details. June 21st, right? What time?" 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when the wedding is supposed to start." "I see. We'll need access to the grounds in advance, at least a day before the event to set up equipment, stage, get everything ready." "That's not a problem. I'll give you the keys and the gate code." "That's great. Now about the festival itself. Given the size of the area, we can invite about 50 participants, body artists, models, performers, musicians. We'll set up several stages around the garden, organize zones for different activities. As I listened to Laurel describe her vision for the event, I felt a strange excitement. It was so unlike anything I'd ever done before. So far from my ordered, predictable life. "And of course, the music," Laurel continued. "Experimental, loud, provocative. We have several bands that could perform. They play unusual music, not the kind of music you usually hear at weddings. Sounds perfect, I said. We discussed many more details. Food for the participants, restrooms, parking, security. Laurel was a professional. She thought of everything. One last question, she said, closing her laptop. Will you be attending the event? I hesitated for a moment. I had originally planned to observe from afar, not to show my son until the last moment. But now, yes, I said firmly. I'll be there. I want to see his reaction. Laurel nodded without commenting. In that case, we'll prepare a special place for you, with a good view but away from the main action. We ended the meeting with the signing of the contract. The sum was impressive, but I didn't care about the money. I could afford it. The upcoming lesson for Randall was worth every dime spent. Walking out of the Epitage office, I felt strangely relieved. The decision had been made. There was no turning back. In 3 weeks, Randall and his fiancée would get an unforgettable surprise instead of an elegant wedding. Eleanor wouldn't approve, but Eleanor's gone, and I'm too old to change. June 21st was impeccably clear and warm, the perfect day for a wedding, or revenge. I arrived at my country house early in the morning, before 8 o'clock, when the Epitage team was already hard at work, transforming the elegant Victorian garden into something resembling the set of a post-apocalyptic carnival movie. Laurel met me at the gate, radiant and energetic despite the early hour. Mr. Higginbotham, good to see you. Would you like to see how the preparations are going? I nodded, leaning on my cane harder than usual. My knee had ached during the night, a reminder of age and the fact that some things are better done when you're young, before your body betrays you. We walked down the central alley where workers were assembling metal structures that resembled the skeletons of prehistoric creatures. Colored cloths were stretched between the trees, creating bizarre shadows. A stage for musicians was being set up by the cart pond. Everything will be ready by 2 o'clock, Laurel explained. The artists and models would arrive by noon. The first performances will start at 2:30, so by 3, when your guests will be in full swing. I looked around my garden, not recognizing it. The perfectly trimmed bushes were now adorned with strange glowing objects. Strange geometric patterns appeared on the immaculate lawn. Everything looked wrong and exciting at the same time. I'd never allowed myself to be this crazy. It's impressive, I said sincerely. Laurel smiled, clearly pleased with the compliment. Our company specializes in creating unforgettable experiences. Believe me, none of the guests will forget this day. I'm sure they will, I murmured. We walked on, discussing the final details. Laurel showed me a place where I could watch the event without being seen. A small gazebo hidden among the trees, with a good view of the central part of the garden and the driveway. From here you will see the arrival of the wedding cortege and the first reaction of she hesitated, the guests. I noticed her awkwardness. Despite her professionalism, Laurel clearly felt out of place, helping me with my revenge. Don't worry, I said dryly. I take full responsibility for the consequences. She nodded without commenting. By noon, the performers had arrived, a strange, eclectic group of people of all ages and styles. Body art artists with suitcases of paint, musicians with instruments I couldn't identify, performers in extravagant outfits or half-naked. I watched from the window of the house as they took their assigned seats, prepared, rehearsed. All this bustle, this controlled frenzy, was so unlike the rank wedding preparations Randall and Olivia were probably expecting. At 2 o'clock, I took my place in the gazebo with binoculars and a thermos of coffee. The festival was starting. Music, loud, rhythmic, with unexpected dissonances, was blasting throughout the garden. Performers, their bodies covered in neon colors, began their strange dances among the metal sculptures. I watched this spectacle with a dual feeling. On the one hand, it was absurd, ridiculous, alien to my understanding of art. On the other hand, it had a kind of primal energy, a kind of freedom that I've always lacked. At 2 hours and 45 minutes, I noticed movement on the driveway. The first cars of the wedding cortege. My heart beat faster. The moment of truth was approaching. I brought the binoculars up to my eyes, focusing on the lead car, a luxurious white limousine with floral decorations. A wedding car. Randall and Olivia were supposed to be there. The limo was followed by about 10 other cars. the first batch of guests. The rest were probably due to arrive later, closer to the scheduled time of the ceremony. The music was getting louder and louder. The performers, more and more extravagant in their movements. Body art models whose nude bodies were covered only in bright colors that created the illusion of fantastic costumes, moved among the metal sculptures. The whole scene resembled a strange dream or an avant-garde movie. The limousine stopped at the main gate. The door opened, and out stepped Randall in a black tuxedo, a flower in his buttonhole, a look of quiet happiness on his face. I hadn't seen my son this close in a long time. He looked mature, more mature than in my memories. Behind him came a girl in a white dress. Olivia, it must have been. Slender, with dark hair arranged in an elegant style. She held a small bouquet of white roses. They stood at the gate, obviously waiting for the other cars to pull up. Randall was saying something to her, pointing toward the mansion. She smiled, nodding. They looked happy, carefree. But then, I noticed the moment they heard music. Randall froze halfway through. Olivia tilted her head, listening. They looked at each other in bewilderment. Randall took a few steps forward, trying to see what was going on behind the trees. And then one of the performers appeared from around the bend in the alley. A tall man, almost completely naked, his body covered with glowing green paint, and something resembling horns on his head. I couldn't hear what Randall said, but it was clear from the look on his face it was shock. Pure, genuine shock. Olivia covered her mouth with her hand. By now the other cars had pulled up. The guests were coming out of them. Men in suits, women in fancy dresses. Everyone looked on in bewilderment. An elderly couple, apparently the bride's parents, looked particularly confused. A woman in a strict blue suit was saying something indignant to the man next to her. Randall, coming to his senses, began to explain something to the guests, gesticulating vigorously. He looked confused but tried to remain calm. And then a whole group of performers, men and women with bodies painted in all the colors of the rainbow, wearing strange headdresses, moving synchronously to the rhythm of the music, appeared from around the corner. The faces of the guests stretched out. Some laughed nervously. Some looked shocked. Some looked outraged. Randall stood frozen in place, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. Olivia was saying something fervently to him, pointing to what was happening. Her face was a mixture of disbelief and growing panic. I watched the scene with a strange satisfaction. The plan had worked even better than I had expected. Total chaos, a complete breakdown of their perfectly planned day. Randall finally decided to act. He headed toward the house, leaving Olivia with the guests. Probably wanted to find out what was going on, find the people responsible. I knew he wouldn't find anyone but Laurel, and she was instructed to direct him to me when he showed up. It was time for my exit. I left my hiding place and headed toward the main alley where the confused guests were still standing. My appearance caused a new wave of bewilderment. Many of them knew me. After all, Albany wasn't such a big city, and I was a prominent figure in certain circles. "Mr. Higginbottom," exclaimed an older woman, whom I identified as Olivia's mother. "What's going on here? Is this some terrible mistake?" I smiled my most polite smile. "No mistake, Mrs. Cavendish, I presume. Just a little cultural event I decided to organize." "A cultural event?" Her voice rose an octave. "My daughter's wedding is to be held here." "Oh?" I acted surprised. I didn't know anything about it. It was a lie, of course. But for a moment I felt like an actor playing a part. Olivia came toward us, her face pale with anger or fear or both. "Mr. Higginbotham, are you Randall's father?" "Yes, that's me." I held out my hand to her. "It's nice to finally meet you, Olivia." She ignored my hand. "What's going on? Why is there, all this?" She looked around at the chaos around us. At that moment, Randall came running toward us. His face was contorted with rage. "What have you done?" he shouted, not caring about decorum. "What the hell did you do?" "I decided to organize a small festival," I replied calmly. "This is my home, after all. I have the right to use it as I see fit." "You knew that." Randall clenched his fists. "You knew about the wedding. You did it on purpose." "What wedding are you talking about?" I continued to play innocent. "No one informed me about the wedding in my house. No one asked my permission." Olivia shifted her gaze from me to Randall and back again, gradually realizing the situation. "Randall?" Her voice shook. You didn't ask your father's permission? Randall looked cornered. Yeah, I was going to. I just didn't have time before I sent out the invitations. You didn't? Olivia repeated incredulously. We'd been planning the wedding for 6 months. Olivia, it's complicated, Randall began, but she interrupted him. You lied to me? Her voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. You said your father had agreed, that he was happy to give us the house. I would have consented, I interjected, if I had been asked properly. But you see, Olivia, my son has a habit of taking things that don't belong to him without asking permission. Randall turned to me, his eyes burning with hatred. You did this on purpose. You wanted to destroy my wedding. I was just organizing an event in my own home, I replied nonchalantly. If it coincided with your plans, which you didn't bother to tell me about, it's not my fault. By this point, a sizable group of guests had gathered around us, watching the scene with a mixture of horror and curiosity. The festival continued around us. Music rumbled, half-naked bodies moved in strange dances. Artists painted on special canvases and on each other. What are we going to do now? My son, Olivia's mother asked, her voice trembling with restrained anger. 200 people are invited. The catering is paid for. The musicians, the photographers. 220 to be exact, I corrected. And yes, that's a problem. Maybe we should have discussed the details with the owner of the house beforehand. Randall took a step toward me, and I thought he might hit me, but Olivia held his hand back. Don't, she said quietly. It won't solve anything. Randall looked broken. All his plans were crumbling before his eyes. We can find another place, he said uncertainly. Maybe some restaurant. On the day of the wedding, Olivia's mother objected. That's impossible. Maybe we should postpone it, one of the guests suggested. Postpone it to another day? And lose all the deposits? Olivia's father was outraged, speaking for the first time. We've invested a fortune in this wedding. The chaos was growing. The guests chattered, offering solutions, expressing their displeasure, demanding explanations. Randall looked increasingly depressed. Olivia held her dignity, but her eyes glistened with held-back tears. I watched the scene with a strange feeling, the satisfaction of revenge mixed with something else. Guilt? No, not really. More like the realization that I was ruining not only the wedding, but something bigger, perhaps the future of Randall and Olivia's relationship. But it was too late to back out. Words had been said, actions had been taken. Randall finally recovered from the shock and made a decision. Listen up, everyone. He raised his voice, drawing the attention of the guests. I apologize for this misunderstanding. The wedding will take place, but not here. We're moving into town to the Grand Albany Hotel. There's a banquet room there that should accommodate all of us. But it's not booked, Olivia objected. I'll call the manager. Randall pulled out his cell phone. Mark owes me. He'll figure something out. I hadn't expected this. Randall was showing a determination I didn't know he had. He was taking responsibility for the situation, trying to save the day. What about the ceremony? Someone asked. The judge should be here. I'll contact him, Randall replied. I'll explain the situation. Ask him to come to the hotel. He turned to the guests. Everyone, please return to their cars. We're meeting at the Grand Albany in an hour. I'll send a text message with the new address to anyone who's still on the road. People began to disperse, talking, casting puzzled glances at the performers and at me. Randall stepped aside, engrossed in a phone conversation, apparently with the hotel manager. Olivia remained standing in front of me. Her eyes were cold. You know, she said quietly, Randall warned me about you, about how violent and controlling you could be. I thought he was exaggerating. I see now that he was too kind in his descriptions. Her words hit harder than I expected. He should have asked permission, I said stubbornly. Yes, he should have, Olivia agreed. It was wrong of him. But what you did, it was cruel. You didn't just punish your son, you ruined what should have been the happiest day of my life. A day I've been preparing for months, and for what? To teach me a lesson? I couldn't find anything to say. For the first time in a long time, I felt ashamed. Olivia shook her head. I had hoped you would become part of our family. Now I see that's impossible. She turned to leave but stopped. One more thing. Randall is not like you. He makes mistakes, but there's no malice in him. There's no desire to hurt others. That's why I'm marrying him. Because despite the way you raised him, he grew up to be a good man. With those words, she walked away, leaving me standing alone in the midst of the chaos I had created myself. Randall ended the phone call and walked over to me. His face was a mask of cold fury. The hotel has agreed to host us. We're moving the wedding there. Congratulations, I said, not knowing what else to say. Don't pretend you care. Randall looked at me with disgust. You got what you wanted. You ruined my day, proved your power. I wanted to teach you a lesson, I replied. To teach you respect. Respect? He laughed bitterly. You don't know the meaning of the word. Respect has to be earned, Dad, and you've never done anything to earn mine. Those words were like a slap in the face. I felt something clench inside me. I raised you, I said quietly. Gave you everything. You gave me money and shelter, Randall replied, but never gave love or understanding. Never supported me in what was important to me. Never respected my decisions, my dreams, my life. He shook his head. I had hoped you would change as you got older. You'd soften. Realize that control and power aren't everything. But I see I was wrong. He turned to leave. Randall, I called out to him. He stopped without turning around. Yeah, the words were stuck in my throat. Apologizing didn't come easily to me. Don't bother, he said without turning around. I don't expect anything more from you. No apologies, no understanding, no love. You're not a father to me anymore. Just a man with whom I had the misfortune to be bound by blood. And he left without looking back. I was left alone in the middle of the garden, which was now filled with strange people, strange sounds, strange colors. The festival went on, indifferent to the human drama playing out in its background. I sat down on a bench, suddenly feeling very old and very tired. What had I done? Was the lesson I wanted to teach worth the pain I had caused? Not just to Randall, but to Olivia and all these people who just wanted to share the joy with a young couple? Laurel walked over to me, her face expressing sympathy. Things didn't go quite as you had planned? I grinned bitterly. No, it went exactly as I had planned. I wanted to ruin my son's wedding, and I did. I wanted to teach him a lesson, and I did. Except, I stopped talking, not knowing how to express what I was feeling. Except that the victory wasn't as sweet as you'd expected, was it? Laurel suggested. I nodded. She understood exactly. What am I supposed to do now? I asked, more to myself than to her. Laurel shrugged. It depends on what you want. If you want to preserve your relationship with your son, it might be worth trying to apologize. Sincerely. He won't accept my apology, I said. You heard what he said. I'm not a father to him anymore. People say a lot of things in anger, Laurel said softly. Doesn't mean they really mean it, or that they'll always think that way. I shook my head. You don't know Randall. He's stubborn, like me. I grinned bitterly. We're alike in that. Still, Laurel said, the choice is yours. You can try to make things right, or you can leave it alone. She walked away, leaving me to ponder her words. The festival continued around me, but I wasn't paying attention to it anymore. My thoughts were with Randall, with Olivia, with what had just happened. I sat like that for a long time until the sun started to slip toward dusk. The festival was in full swing, but I felt completely disconnected from it. It was as if it was all happening in another reality that had nothing to do with me. The thought came suddenly. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I could go to the hotel, apologize to everyone, try to undo at least some of the damage I'd done. But immediately another thought stopped me. What if Randall was right? What if I really never deserved his respect? What if my showing up would only make things worse? I sat there torn by conflicting desires until it was finally dark. The festival gradually quieted down. The performers and guests departed. Soon I was alone in my garden, which no longer looked familiar or comforting. A decision had to be made. Go to the hotel and try to apologize, or leave things as they were, recognizing that some bridges had been burned for good. I pulled out my phone, staring at the dark screen. One call could change everything, or change nothing. I didn't go to the hotel that night, didn't dial Randall's number. I didn't try to apologize. Instead, I went back to my townhouse, poured myself a whiskey, a double shot, even though the doctors forbade it, and sat in a chair by the fireplace, looking at the flames but not seeing them. The epitage team had promised to tidy up the garden by morning, to remove all traces of the festival. Laurel said they were professionals. No one would even guess what was going on there. But I knew that in my memory this day would remain forever, the day I finally lost my son. The phone rang several times. I didn't answer it. Whoever it was, I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to explain my actions. I didn't want to hear judgment. I didn't want sympathy. All I wanted was peace. I woke up the next morning with a headache and a feeling of emptiness. The events of yesterday seemed unreal, like a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream. I had really done it. Ruined my son's wedding, hurt innocent people. For what? For a lesson that maybe no one needed? I turned on the TV, fearing there might be a report on yesterday's scandal. The local news loves stories like this. A famous lawyer disrupting his son's wedding. It's a great story for the tabloids. But nothing happened. Apparently, Randall and Olivia had managed to keep the incident under wraps, or the reporters hadn't had time to pick up the story yet. The doorbell rang around 10 o'clock. On the doorstep stood Berkeley, the same friend who had unwittingly informed me of the wedding a week earlier. He didn't look well, wrinkled with dark circles under his eyes. "May I come in?" he asked without the usual greeting. I stepped aside silently, letting him into the house. We went into the living room, where I offered him coffee. He declined. "What was that yesterday, Alfred?" he asked bluntly. "Were you there?" I didn't remember seeing him among the guests. I was. I got there just as all the chaos started. Saw half-naked people with body art, the bride's parents freaking out, and your son trying to save the day. I didn't know what to say. Justify myself? Apologize? Neither seemed appropriate. "Did you orchestrate this whole circus?" Berkeley asked. "Yes," I answered simply. "It was me." Berkeley shook his head. "Why, Alfred? Why? For God's sake, why?" I sighed. He had to ask permission, not just use my house as he saw fit. "And that's why you decided to ruin the wedding?" Berkeley looked at me in disbelief. "It's a disproportionate reaction, and you know it." "I needed to teach him a lesson," I said stubbornly, even though I didn't believe what I was saying. "A lesson?" Berkeley snorted. "What lesson, Alfred? That his father is a vengeful old man who would hurt innocent people to prove his power?" "A great lesson, I can't say." His words hurt me, but I didn't let it show. "You don't understand," I said. "Randall's always done that, always taking things that didn't belong to him without asking permission. Always put me on the spot." "So?" Berkeley spread his hands. "He's your son, Alfred, the only one. Yes, he made a mistake. Yes, he should have asked permission. But your reaction," he shook his head, "it was too much." I didn't say anything. What could I say? Berkeley was right, and I knew it. But to admit it was to admit that I had made a terrible, irreparable mistake. "How are they?" I finally asked. "Randall and Olivia?" Berkeley sighed. The wedding had taken place at the Grand Albany Hotel. It was, not as fancy as planned, but they pulled it off. The hotel manager, a friend of Randall's, did everything he could, provided a banquet room, organized a buffet. Not everything went smoothly, of course. A lot of the guests couldn't reorganize. Some of them just left. Olivia's parents were furious. They'd paid a fortune for a wedding in a Victorian mansion with a garden and got a hastily organized reception in a city hotel. I felt a prick of conscience. I hadn't thought about the financial side of things. Someone had paid for this wedding, invested money, time, hopes, and I ruined it all. "Olivia was doing great," Berkeley continued. "She smiled, said the place wasn't important, just her and Randall. But you could tell she was upset. It was supposed to be a perfect day, and it turned into chaos." "And Randall?" I asked quietly. Berkeley looked at me for a long moment. "He was different. I hadn't seen him like that in a long time. Determined, focused. He took control of the situation, calmed Olivia down, organized the hotel, convinced the judge to come. All evening, he'd taken care of the guests, apologized for the inconvenience, done everything he could to save the party." I nodded. Strangely, I felt proud. My son had shown character, handled a crisis. Maybe he wasn't as weak as I'd always thought he was. And another thing, Alfred, Berkeley added, Randall didn't blame you, at least not publicly. He told the guests that there had been a misunderstanding about the dates, that you'd accidentally booked the house for another event. He defended you even though you didn't deserve it. This news stunned me. After all I had done, Randall wouldn't vilify me in front of others. He lied to save my face. But that doesn't mean he forgave you, Berkeley continued. After the ceremony, when we were alone, he said he never wanted to see you again. Ever again. I expected that, but still the words hit like a whip. He said he was changing his last name, Berkeley added, taking his mother's name, Prescott, and he's renouncing his inheritance. All he wants from you is for you to leave him alone. I closed my eyes. The pain I felt was physical, like someone had stabbed me in the chest. Randall had given up on me completely, cut off all ties. I was alone. Olivia spoke out too, Berkeley continued sternly, said she'd never let you anywhere near their future children, that you're toxic and dangerous. That's enough, I said quietly. I understood. Berkeley fell silent, looking at me with a mixture of anger and pity. Why did you come here, Berkeley? I asked. To tell me what a terrible father I am? I already know that. I came because we are friends, Alfred, he answered. Or were. I was hoping. I don't know what I hoped for. That I'd see remorse? That I could help you make things right? He shook his head. But I guess it's too late for that. He stood up, getting ready to leave. Cherie, you. Randall and Olivia are flying out tonight, he said. Honeymooning in the Maldives. 2 weeks. Then they're coming back to Albany. But not for long. Randall found a job in L.A. They're moving there next month. He headed for the door, but stopped and turned around. You know, Alfred, I always respected you as a lawyer. You were brilliant, insightful, able to win the most hopeless cases. But as a human being, he shook his head. As a man, you were always selfish, always thinking only of yourself, your principles, your pride. And this is what it has led to. With those words, he walked away, leaving me alone with my thoughts and regrets. I returned to the living room, sat down in a chair, and sat motionless for a long time, staring into the void. My thoughts swirled around Berkeley's words, around the image of Randall saving the wedding, around Olivia holding back tears. What had I done? The satisfaction of revenge I'd felt yesterday was completely gone, replaced by a heavy, oppressive feeling. I won the battle, but I lost the war. And not just any war, I lost a son, the only person who connected me to the future, to life after my death. Now I was truly alone. The memories came flooding back. Randall at 5, with a wide smile, showing me a drawing, a doodle that was supposed to represent our family. Randall at 10, listening earnestly as I explained to him the basics of law. Randall at 15, with anger in his gaze when I forbade him to go to a concert with his friends. And the incident that suddenly surfaced in my mind with painful clarity. Randall was 7. I was working on an important case defending a major client accused of tax fraud. The case was complicated, the chances of success were minimal, but I found a loophole in the law that could save the day. I prepared documents, dozens of pages of legal analysis, references to precedents, arguments. I worked on them for weeks, often late into the night. The documents were spread out on a table in my home office, neatly numbered, ready to be filed in court the next day. Randall wanted to show me something, a new toy, I think. I waved him off, saying I was busy. He took offense and left. An hour later, I returned to the office and found disaster. Randall had drawn on my paperwork with colored markers. Brightly colored lines, circles, and stars covered the pages, making the text unreadable. I was furious. Grabbed him by the shoulders, screaming that he was ruining my job, that he could cause me to lose the case, that he was an irresponsible, selfish child. Randall cried, saying he wanted to make the paperwork prettier, that he wanted to help me because I looked so tired. I wasn't listening. I was too angry. As punishment, I forbade him from going to the school play where he was to play the lead role. A play he'd been preparing for months, studying, rehearsing, a play that meant a lot to him. Eleanor begged me to change my mind. She said I'd break the child's heart, that it was too cruel, that he just wanted my attention. But I was adamant. Randall had to realize that actions have consequences, that you can't just go out and ruin someone else's work. On the day of the play, Randall stayed home with me while Eleanor went to the school to explain her son's absence. She came back red-eyed and said she would never forgive me for that the teacher was shocked, the other kids upset, the parents outraged, and Randall sat in his room, quiet and pale, and didn't cry, just stared out the window with empty eyes. The next day I recovered the documents, filed them in court, and won the case. But something was lost between me and my son, something that could no longer be recovered. Now sitting in an empty house after a ruined wedding, I realized that that incident was one of many times I had put my principles, my job, my pride, above my own son's happiness. When I punished him not in proportion to the offense, but simply because I was angry and wanted him to suffer as I had suffered, wasn't what happened yesterday different? Didn't I do to the adult Randall what I did to the little one? Didn't I punish him for his misbehavior in a way that hurt not only him, but other innocent people? I stood up and walked over to the window, looking out onto the street where ordinary life was going on. People were going about their business, unaware of the drama playing out in my heart. Maybe it wasn't too late. Maybe I could go to the airport, intercept Randall and Olivia before their flight, apologize, beg forgiveness. But what would I say? How would I explain my actions? And would it have been sincere or just an attempt to assuage my own conscience? I didn't know the answers to these questions. I didn't know if I had the right to apologize after what I had done. I didn't know if I was capable of changing, of becoming a better person, or if it was too late for an old man to learn new tricks. The phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. The number was an unfamiliar one. I hesitated but answered. "Mr. Higginbotham," a woman's voice. "It's Laurel from Epitage. I'm calling to let you know we finished cleaning your country house. Everything is as clean as we said it would be." "Thank you," I answered mechanically. "I was also wondering about—" She hesitated. "How are you, after last night?" The question caught me off guard. How am I? Broken, devastated, full of regret. But I couldn't say that to a stranger. "I'm fine," I lied. "Thank you for your concern." "I know it's none of my business," Laurel continued. "But did you talk to your son? Have you tried to explain yourself?" "No," I answered briefly. "He doesn't want to see me." "I understand." I could hear the sympathy in her voice. "But maybe in time. Family ties are strong, Mr. Higginbotham, sometimes stronger than we realize." "Maybe," I said, not believing my own words. We said goodbye and I was alone again. Family ties. Had they ever been strong between me and Randall? Or had it always been just a biological bond, unsupported by real love and understanding? I remembered Eleanor saying that I had never really tried to understand my son, that I had always wanted him to be a copy of me, not myself, that I loved the idea of a son more than the real child with his hopes, dreams, fears. Was she right? She might have been, but it's too late to ask now. Eleanor was gone, and Randall was gone too. All that was left was me, an old man with memories and regrets. I decided to go to the country house, not because I didn't trust Laurel and her team, but simply because I needed a change of scenery. I needed movement, action to drown out my thoughts. The drive took about an hour. I drove slowly, without the usual hurry. Time didn't matter anymore. No one was waiting for me. No one depended on my presence. The country house looked as it always did. Stately, well-kept, perfect. No trace of yesterday's chaos. Laurel and her team really knew their stuff. I stepped inside, walked through the rooms which seemed unnaturally quiet. I walked out into the garden where the drama that had cost me my son had played out only yesterday. The garden looked as usual too. Lawns mowed, paths sprinkled with gravel, flowers in full bloom. No sign of metal structures, strange installations, naked bodies covered in paint. It was as if nothing had happened, but it did, and the consequences were real, even if no visible traces remained. I sat down on a bench by the carp pond. The fish swam, unperturbed as always. Their simple lives went on without change, without drama, without regret. How simple it would be to be a carp. The phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. "Mr. Higginbotham, this is Olivia." Randall and I are flying out in 2 hours. I know you don't deserve this, but I think it's right to say if you want to say goodbye to your son, this is your last chance. We're at the airport, Terminal B. Randall doesn't know I'm texting you. I stared at the message, not believing my eyes. Olivia, the girl I'd ruined my wedding for, was giving me a chance I didn't deserve. What am I supposed to do? Go to the airport, look for them, try to explain myself, or recognize that some bridges had been burned forever and leave them alone? I stared at my phone, unable to make a decision. Time was running out. The chance was getting slimmer by the minute. 3 weeks passed like a blur. I didn't go to the airport that day. I sent a quick text to Olivia. Thanks for the offer, but I'd rather leave it at that. Have a safe trip. Even now, I don't know if it was the right decision. Part of me wanted to go, to see Randall one last time, to try to explain myself. But the other part, the proud, stubborn part, couldn't bring myself to take that step. And that part won. The days blended into a monotonous routine. Morning coffee, reading the news, a walk in the park, a lonely dinner, a glass of whiskey, sleep. Sometimes the phone rang, but I didn't answer it. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to explain myself, make excuses, listen to judgment. Berkeley called twice, left messages. Something about how we should talk, that he was worried about me, that isolation wasn't the answer. I never called back. Our conversation after the wedding exhausted everything we could say to each other. On the morning of the 21st day after the incident, I involuntarily counted the days like a prisoner in a cell. A letter arrived, a plain, paper letter in a stamped envelope. Such a rarity in these days of electronic communication. The sender was Olivia Higginbotham. She took Randall's last name, even though he was going to give it up. That made me chuckle bitterly. I stared at the envelope for a long moment, hesitant to open it. What could it possibly contain? Curses, threats, demands to never go near them? I deserved all of it. Finally, pulling myself together, I opened the envelope. Inside was a piece of paper written in neat handwriting. Mr. Higginbotham, I have long considered whether to write to you. Randall does not know of this letter and probably would not approve of it. But I feel I must speak out, not for you, but for myself, to close this chapter and move on. What you did on our wedding day was cruel and selfish. You thought only of your wounded pride, your desire to teach a lesson, your right to punish. You didn't think about how it would affect other people, me, my parents, our friends. You turned what should have been the happiest day of our lives into chaos and humiliation. Randall told me about you, how you always put your rules and principles before his happiness, how you punished him for the slightest transgression, how you never tried to understand him, to accept him for who he was. I thought he was exaggerating. All children sometimes resent their parents. Now I see he was right. You know what the saddest part is? That you missed the opportunity to get to know a wonderful person, your son. Randall is kind, caring, talented. He listens and understands others, which is more than I can say for you. He is successful in his career, even though you never believed in his choices. He became a good man in spite of you, not because of you. On the day of the wedding, when things didn't go as planned, it was Randall who took control. He calmed me down, found a new venue, explained things to the guests. He showed a maturity and responsibility that you would be proud of if you could see beyond your resentments. I will not waste words trying to convince you to change your mind or behavior. That would be futile, but I want you to know that Randall deserves a better father. He deserves someone who will love him unconditionally, support his choices, rejoice in his happiness. He deserves what you could never give him. We leave for Los Angeles in 2 weeks and have no plans to return. Randall is indeed changing his last name, taking my maiden name, Cavendish. He's renouncing his inheritance and any connection to you. It is his decision, and I support it. Goodbye, Mr. Higginbotham. I hope you find peace and meaning in your remaining years. But it will be without us. Olivia. I reread the letter twice. The words hit hard, without softening or compromise. Olivia was straightforward, like a good lawyer in court. Maybe she really did deserve a better father-in-law. Strangely, I felt no anger, just fatigue and a strange, detached recognition of the rightness in her words. I had really missed the opportunity to get to know my son, really never tried to understand him, really put my principles before his happiness, and the result was complete loneliness in the sunset of his life. I folded the letter neatly and put it away in my desk drawer. I didn't throw it away. I didn't tear it up in anger. For some reason, I wanted to keep those hard, honest words, maybe as a reminder of the price I'd paid for my pride. The phone rang as I poured myself coffee. Berkeley's number. I didn't usually answer, but today, after Olivia's letter, I felt the need to hear the voice of an old friend. Alfred. Berkeley sounded surprised. He obviously hadn't expected me to answer the phone. Yes, it's me, I answered, sitting down in my chair with a cup of coffee. How are you? Berkeley asked cautiously. Alive, I said briefly. What's new? Berkeley was silent for a moment, apparently deciding whether to talk about what was on his mind. There's news, he said at last. I don't know if it's good or bad for you. Randall has officially changed his last name. He's now Randall Cavendish, and filed papers to renounce his inheritance. I nodded, though Berkeley couldn't see it. I know, Olivia texted me. Olivia? Berkeley was surprised. I didn't expect her to. She wrote me a letter, a real one, on paper. She told me what she thought. How does that make you feel? That's a good question. How did I feel? Anger? Resentment? Regret? A little of everything, but most of all, tiredness. I don't know, I answered honestly. Just emptiness, I guess. Berkeley sighed. Alfred, I spoke to Randall before they left. He's not as adamant as he seems. I think if you had made the first move— No, I interrupted. Don't, Berkeley. Don't give me false hope. Randall made his decision, and I respect it. For the first time in his life, I guess. But you're his father, Berkeley exclaimed. Are you really ready to lose your only son? I grinned bitterly. I've already lost him, Berkeley. A long time ago. I just didn't want to admit it. There was a long pause. I could hear Berkeley's breathing in the tube, but he didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything either. You've changed, he said finally. Before, you wouldn't have admitted your guilt. You'd have fought to the end, fighting for what was right. Siram, maybe I just got tired of fighting, I said. Or maybe I finally realized I'm not always right. What are you going to do? Berkeley asked. That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it. Lived day to day, no plans, no goals. But now that Berkeley asked, the answer came naturally. Sell the houses, both the townhouse and the country house. I'll leave Albany, maybe Florida. It's warmer, less memories. Really? Berkeley sounded shocked. You've lived here your whole life. Exactly, I said. And what did it get me? An empty house and a lonely old age. Maybe it's time for a change. We talked some more about the weather, about our mutual acquaintance who'd had surgery, about the new mayor of Albany. The usual, safe topics. Then we said goodbye, promising to call each other next week. I knew I wouldn't call back. Berkeley probably wouldn't either. After the call, I decided to drive to the country house, probably for the last time before the sale. I needed to evaluate what to take with me, what to keep, what to throw away. The road was painfully familiar. Every turn, every tree, every farm along the way. I knew it all by heart. How many times had I traveled this road over the years? Hundreds? Thousands? And always alone. Eleanor rarely rode with me, said the house was too cold, too impersonal, like a museum rather than a dwelling. Randall avoided traveling too, saying it was boring, nothing to do. I always dismissed their opinions. The house was what I wanted it to be, perfect, orderly, flawless. Just like my life. At least that's what I thought. The country house greeted me with silence. I walked in, looking around the rooms. The living room with antique furniture. The dining room with a long table that seated 20, though I never gave large receptions. The library with books no one read. Everything was as it had always been. Spotlessly clean, not a speck of dust or a speck of dust. The housekeeper came twice a week to keep the place in order, though I'd rarely been here lately. I went up to the second floor and looked in the bedrooms. My own, the guest bedrooms, Randall's former room. The last one was practically empty. A bed, a closet, a desk. No personal belongings, no trace of his presence. It was as if he'd never lived here. Going downstairs, I stepped out into the garden. The day was clear, sunny. Flowers were blooming, birds were singing, carp were swimming in the pond. Nature was unaware of human drama and tragedy. She didn't care that I had lost my son, that I was alone, that I was going to sell the house and move away. I sat on a bench by the pond, watching the fish. Their measured movements, their simple existence was strangely enviable. No complications, no resentments, no regrets. Just life in its purest form. My thoughts flowed freely, without the usual control. I thought of the years I had lived, of my accomplishments and mistakes, about the brilliant career that had brought me money and respect, but not happiness, about my marriage to Eleanor, which could have been better if I had been able to listen and understand, about my son, whom I tried to mold in my own image without noticing that he was a separate person with his own dreams and aspirations. I always thought I was doing the right thing, that my principles, my rules, my ideas about life are the only right ones, that everyone should live by them, especially my son. But what did I end up with? An empty house, a lonely old age, a son who abandoned my name and my inheritance. Were my principles worth the price? Eleanor said that life is more than rules and obligations, that it was also about love and forgiveness and seeing beauty in unexpected places. I didn't understand her then. Maybe I'm starting to now, when it's too late. The sun was beginning to sink. I sat on the bench for a few hours, lost in thought. It was time to head back to town. Tomorrow I'll call a real estate agent, start the process of selling houses. I'll look for options in Florida, maybe a small house or a condo in some retirement complex. I'll start a new life. No attachments, no past, no regrets. I stood up, took one last look at the carp pond. I'll be gone, but they'll stay. Maybe the new owners will take care of them. Maybe they won't. It's not my concern anymore. On the way home, I stopped at a small restaurant on the outskirts of Albany. I'd never been there before. Too simple a place for a man of my position. But that didn't matter today. A young waitress escorted me to a table by the window and brought me a menu. I ordered a steak and a glass of red wine. The food was simple but tasty. The wine was cheap but pleasant. There were ordinary people sitting around, families with children, couples, single customers like me. They all lived their lives with their own joys and problems. No one knew who I was. No one judged me. It was, liberating. When I got home, I sat down at my desk and started making a list of things I would take with me to Florida. The list turned out to be surprisingly short. A few books, photo albums, a watch I'd inherited from my father, some clothes. The rest could be sold along with the houses or given to charity. My gaze fell on a framed photograph, the only one I kept in plain sight. The three of us, me, Eleanor, little Randall, about 6 years old, a happy family at least outwardly. Eleanor smiles her soft smile. Randall laughs, showing the absence of a front tooth. I stand up straight, serious but with a slight smile. A rare moment when I let myself relax. I took the picture, staring at it for a long time. Then I put it in the box of things I would take with me, not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder of what could have been, of what I'd lost. In the morning, I called the real estate agent. The process was set in motion. In a couple months, I would be far away from here, from Albany, from the past, from memories. Some might call it escapism. Maybe it is. But at my age, it's too late to start battles that can't be won. It's too late to try to fix what was broken so long ago and so thoroughly. Randall made his choice. I've made mine. We'll go our separate ways, and maybe it's for the best. For him, for sure. For me, time will tell. I don't regret my decision to leave. Just a strange feeling of emptiness and release at the same time. As if I'm shedding a heavy burden I've carried all my life. Eleanor would say I'm running away from problems again instead of solving them. Maybe she'd be right. But Eleanor is no longer there to give her opinion. There is only me, an old tired man who has finally realized that some battles are not worth fighting. Some wounds are too deep to heal. Some relationships can't be repaired, no matter how much I wish they could. So I'm going to leave. I'll start a new life, with no past, no commitments, no hope of a reconciliation that will never come. It's not a happy ending, but it may be the only one possible for someone like me.